What's going on, Bills Mafia, on a sweaty night in Western New York here? I am Lance Nelson. To my right is Benjamin Shoop. To my left is Scott Kasson. And we're rolling through the dog days. It's about a month out now, and the boys will be at Fisher, and we'll be having a little bit more fun. We'll have actual news and things to talk about. But for now, we're gonna do a little roster prediction here in the middle of June. Fellas, how we doing on Friday night?
Doing good, doing good. Glad to be back. I know I missed last week. I had a little bit of a wedding weekend for one of my cousins, some people in town. So we had a good, nice little weekend that way. I'm fortunate enough, I'm in my basement that's very nice and cool. So it's the only part of the house that's cool right now. So yeah, I'm actually not too bad right now in the heat, but doing well.
I'm upstairs in a non-heat controlled room under a skylight. Good times.
That just sounds like poor planning. I'd move
Indeed.
the setup.
Yeah, did not have time.
Yeah, it's pretty hot this week down in Baltimore. I think tomorrow is supposed to be 102, and Sunday I got football playoffs, so I will be hopefully outside for a long time because it means we're winning. But
There you go.
gonna be a hot one, so making sure I hydrate this weekend with water, not beer like other weekends. So I don't die of some heat stroke out on the turf. It's always hotter on turf than it is anywhere else in the world.
Absolutely. Right on. Well, to get started, I guess Scott and I asked this question earlier. Do you think Josh Allen's a lock to make this 53-man roster? What do you think, Ben?
Oh, I don't know, man. This one, I know he's good in fantasy, but in real life, I don't know. No, I'm joking. Yeah, I mean, he's obviously going to be one. Quarterback room feels pretty much set, for them at least this year. Next year, I know they had Trubisky on a 2-year deal, but next year, who knows what will happen. But yeah, this year seems pretty set. You got Shane, I always mispronounce his last name, so I'm just going to call him Shane. But Shane there as well, but I think he'll be more of kind of a practice squad if emergency quarterback type situation. So quarterback room, pretty easy. Started off with that one. Obviously, Josh Allen got 17 back there, and Mitch Trubisky, who hopefully we only see in the preseason this year and holding kicks maybe if somebody struggles there in that holding position. So who knows? But yeah, most likely just going to have Trubisky sitting on the bench, hopefully for the entire season. Just encouraging Josh Allen.
Yeah, not a whole lot of drama in the QB room this year as far as who makes the team, which is kind of a nice change of pace because before the Josh Allen era, it was like a 15, 20-year period where there was a whole lot of drama almost every year over the quarterback room. So it's nice to not have to worry about that. We got one of the best quarterbacks in the league in Josh Allen as the starter. Trubisky, who, like I said in a couple of weeks ago, checks our number one box in being a backup and that he's friends with Josh Allen. Hopefully we don't see him at all. And then Shane Buechele, was in the system last year in the practice squad. So I don't see anything changing there unless maybe they bring in a camp arm who really excels. But yeah, I think we roll with the same, or not the same three. Kyle Allen was a backup last year, but Josh Allen and then Trubisky is the two on the roster. And then Buechele, probably another year on the practice squad for him. And who knows, maybe someone will even try to pick him up, which I don't necessarily foresee. But yeah, it's a good feeling as a football fan this time of year to not have any quarterback questions.
Yeah, no, I wanted to start a little bit with the easy one and just get some conversation flowing around. I didn't know. Do you guys had any feelings between Buechele and Trubisky? I think Trubisky will be the backup, and I think they're going to trust him to do some things if he needs to, and I'm going to hope that we don't need him to, like you mentioned. I think that's everyone's hope in Bill's Mafia. So, um, yeah, I think that, it's Allen and Trubisky without a doubt, and Buechele hits the practice squad.
Do
And
you guys do you guys think that there's a chance they bring in somebody else to hit that practice squad spot instead of Bouchel?
hard to tell. I mean, if there's an injury or something where a roster spot opens up, or if they just don't like what they're seeing from him and then they cut him to bring someone else in, if somebody else kind of gets released or something from another team, but I don't expect it to happen unless there's, unless Bouchel maybe gets injured or has just really poor performance through the first couple weeks of camp.
Yeah, I don't see it either unless something like that you said happens. He was here last year, knows the system. They don't have to learn a new name for the practice squad quarterback. So I think they run it back with him. And I'm sure he looked good enough in the scout team opportunity he was getting last year to warrant being brought back. So, like I said earlier, if it can be as drama-free as possible, I think they'll try to keep it that way.
Right
Yeah,
on.
I agree.
All right, roll us into running back, Scott.
Yeah, so I feel like the running back room is another spot where there's not a whole lot of drama either. Might be wrong, but just at least the way it looks on paper. Obviously, we have James Cook coming back, who was fourth in the league in rushing last year, and a lot of people are thinking is going to take that next step to being, one of the best backs in the NFL, especially in a Joe Brady type offense, which he really thrived in the second half. Ty Johnson probably is a lock to make the team unless something crazy happens. He had a great second half of the year as well, and he can return kicks. And on this roster, as it's currently constructed, not necessarily. There's not anybody who is like, "Yep, that's our returner." Like we don't have an Andre Roberts or an Isaiah McKenzie on the team anymore, who we know is going to be that guy. So he's probably in the mix to be the kick and punt returner. And then Ray Davis, we drafted him. He was one of my favorite running backs in the draft, one of my favorite picks of the draft that the Bills made. So feels like those three are kind of the locks to make the team, barring anything crazy. No, you never know. Like Frank Gore Jr., Darrington Evans, the other two guys that are going to camp. Maybe one of those shows something where we can't let them go, but I see one of the two of them going to the practice squad, the other one probably getting cut. And if I had to pick right now, I would probably say Frank Gore makes the practice squad, only because we know what Evans can do. He was here last year. If all things being equal, maybe take the guy we haven't seen that may have a little bit more upside just because we don't know yet. But yeah, do you guys feel anything differently about that position group?
Yeah, this one was. I mean, it hurts for a guy like Frank Gore Jr. because you're rooting for him. You hope that he can really show out. If he does show out in the preseason, that might make things interesting. Then, like they might say, okay, well, if Ty Johnson looks all right, and maybe not the same as last year, but just all right, they might go, okay, well, Frank Gore Jr. is younger. We can use him maybe a little bit more, but like you said, I don't think that it will happen. I think Ty Johnson showed enough last year, and even if he struggles a little bit in the preseason and training camp, I think they'll say, you know what, he's that veteran running back, that true veteran running back that we need in that backfield. And he can do it. He can do a little bit of everything, right? He can go out of the backfield as a receiver. He can go in between the tackles. He can do a little bit of everything. He's not really the greatest in a certain area, but he can, he's a well-balanced back. So I think, yeah, he'll be a guy that's, used. You don't really know how they're going to use him when he's back there. They could use him in a million ways. James Cook, obviously, like you said, Scott, he's a lock. I mean, he was unbelievable last year. Obviously, still has a few things he's got to clean up, but he's still also pretty young and can take that next step. And even if he doesn't take that next step and he does kind of what he did last year, I think Bills fans will still be very, very happy with what he does. And then Ray Davis, you drafted him that high for a reason. You're not going to put him on the practice squad. But yeah, the only one that might make a run, I guess, is Frank Gore Jr. Because if he does show out in training camp, they might say, well, maybe he doesn't make it to practice squad if we do cut him. Maybe he goes somewhere else after we cut him and he makes another roster and they end up regretting it. But at the end of the day, I think he'll have a solid preseason, but I don't think it'll be anything to warrant making the 53-man. So I got Frank Gore going to the practice squad as well. And then Darrington Evans, another guy, good story when it comes to here in Buffalo. People liked him last year. He's bounced around in a couple teams, but it's running back's a tough position in this league to make as that, second, third, fourth running back year after year, because there are so many guys that come in that can do similar things. So he's a tough one, but I think he'll end up somewhere on a practice squad. But I don't think it will be Buffalo.
Yeah, I think he's going to want a shot to play elsewhere. He's going to probably be asked to be released and end up somewhere else when we're talking about Darrington Evans. And I think that lands Frank Gore Jr. on the practice squad. I don't expect a surprise. And the reason is I just think Joe Brady showed he really liked Ty Johnson, and I do too, frankly. I think the guy falls forward a ton and just gets that forward momentum going really well. And then I think you absolutely have, your draft pick in Ray Davis with James Cook, and I have them as one too, on a depth chart type of scenario. And we'll see. We'll see how that plays out if Ty Johnson starts as the two while Ray Davis is figuring some stuff out, if he doesn't necessarily get up to speed right away. But I kind of think that Ray Davis brings that punch that you need in the change of pace to complement James Cook, plus pass blocking and receiving capabilities will give him the edge on third down, I think, over Ty Johnson. And oftentimes um, we may even see James Cook a little bit more on third down than we did last year. If they figure out some different ways to block things up and not need the running back, and we can see James Cook more as a pass catching option. In the comments, John's saying that show more on his pass catching, and we talked about that a lot with his drop rate being what it is, ninth worst drop rate among RBs over the past few years, and just needs to clean it up. I think it's not so much how many he's dropping for me. It's the times that he's doing it, the moments in the game. Even I talked about that with the fumbles as well. I think it's not necessarily how many fumbles he has, but the times that he did fumble were very crucial situations. So can't have that when we need ball security. And I know there's never a good time for it, but I mean, if you're winning, by 20 points and you do it, that's not as critical as, close game, up by 3, down by 3 type of scenario. And so for me, I do have Cook, Ray Davis, and then Ty Johnson as the third RB with Frank Gore heading the practice squad. Because I think if the Bills try to ask Evans to go to the practice squad, he's going to decline and ask to be released to be going elsewhere. And so I agree. And then Reggie Gilliam, I'm going to count as a back, a fullback, and we'll talk about him. Obviously, a utility role player in this scheme. I think they keep him. There may be a question to ask yourself once we see a little bit more about what they want to do on offense, and if they're I know Shoop, we're going to get to the wide receivers in a little bit, but for me, I'm toying with the idea, if I'm going to keep 7 receivers, do I ask Dawson Knox to do what Reggie Gilliam can on offense and give me 7 receivers? So, I don't know. In the comments, tell us what you think about that. Maybe do you think a 7 wide receiver roster with no Reggie Gilliam, or Reggie Gilliam on this roster and 6, or some could even say 5 if they go deeper in other positions. But I think Reggie Gilliam makes the 53 and is a useful part of this team. I think his leadership and the way he caused a couple fumbles on special teams last year, things like that. I think he brings stuff to the table, and he is an athletic dude. He does have the ability to go out, and I think they tried to feature him a little bit in the preseason, and it was a little bit confusing sometimes when they were throwing some of the routes to him. I maybe definitely in training camp I was there, and I saw them doing some work with him on some like out routes and different things throughout the sessions. But yeah, where do you see Reggie Gilliam fitting in the roster, and how do you feel about basically everything I said there?
Yeah, I definitely think Gilliam makes the team for all the reasons you said. I want him on the team, not just for what he does on offense, but especially on special teams. McDermott and Bean love their special teams guys. He's a leader on special teams. I think he's on all 6 special teams units. And that's the kind of guy that, they don't necessarily grow on trees. 1, guys who are that effective on special teams, and 2, guys that are that excited about playing special teams and actually want to do it. He seems to be like a really team first guy. And he's definitely a guy I think they have on their roster. In an idea of maybe having like Dawson Knox fill that role, I think Dawson Knox is too valuable at being a blocking tight end, pass catching tight end, can line him up in the slot to potentially use him more of like that H-back kind of role like Gilliam is. So I'd be surprised if they go that route, especially if Dawson's fully healthy this year. So Yeah, I think Gilliam is as close to a lock as you can be, considering that the fullback is dying. But yeah, he's a guy I definitely want on the team, and I'd be very surprised if he wasn't come week 1.
Yeah, we've talked about him the past few months and kind of just where he fits in this offense, what he's going to be in this offense. We still don't really know yet. They've obviously used him. They tried to use him in different ways. They showed it last year in training camp. They showed it in the preseason, like you guys said. I do think he makes this roster. I mean, he was one that there's one guy I think that ends up getting cut that might be a little bit surprising because of Reggie Gilliam. And we'll get to him. I'll get to him a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, he's a guy that has shown he can do, again, a little bit of everything, right? And what does Sean McDermott love? He loves his versatile guys, right? He loves guys that can do a little bit of everything. So yeah, I think he's going to make the roster. But I did just want to touch on real quick the James Cook as well, like the whole passing and fumbling. As much as it was, yes, that it was bad timing, I think it was also just the types of drops and fumbles, right? They were almost careless, and he had one where he was running and all of a sudden just dropped the ball and fumbled it. Luckily, it bounced right back up to him, but even the drops wide open, their concentration stuff. So, as much as it's worrying he needs to show more in the passing game, a lot of it just seems like concentration stuff, which are a lot of times the most frustrating, right? It's like you're like, oh my, like half the people in the stadium might be able to do that and catch that ball or not drop the ball while they're running, right? So yeah, I just want to touch on that. But yeah, Reggie Gilliam, I think he ends up making it. I think they just like him too much over there at One Bills Drive, and they've shown it time after time that they're willing to trust him in a lot of different scenarios. So yeah, I think he ends up making the roster, and he's the one fullback they keep.
Yeah, I think Cook on that note is young still, so it could be a little bit of a maturity thing too. And I think that's going to come. And I think as we keep going here, I saw that someone put out something about a contract potentially for James Cook to be extended. And I don't want to get too far into another topic because we're talking about who's making the team this year, but I did think it was interesting, at least, that a lot of the comments, and I agreed with, like, I don't know if I want to sign him to an extension, because the way the Bills have kind of been configuring their RB room is, kind of drafting every year you get one, and then we'll see what happens. And if Cook does struggle this year, then that probably gets RB towards the top of the list for next year's draft to try to get someone in and make sure we have someone who can be featured moving forward. I fully expect, and I'm maybe just a big fan of James Cook. Maybe that's it, but I fully expect him to take another step forward, and I expect him to improve on what he did last year.
Yeah, I would be surprised, like you said, if they sign him to an extension, especially after this year, especially today's NFL. You can get running backs pretty easily. Yeah, and the way our salary cap is and is going to be, having an expensive running back just doesn't seem like the best idea. But who knows? Maybe he plays himself into being irreplaceable.
The only thing I would think of is they would extend him early so they can get ahead of it if they have that much confidence in him. If they can get him at a solid price. But again, what in a running back nowadays, what is a solid price that isn't risky, right? It's not like James Cook is be like, oh yeah, I'll sign a 4-year deal for $4 million each year. He's not going to do that now in his career, right? He just came off a huge season. So that's the other tough part is what is a number that the Bills would be comfortable with, and what would also be a number that James Cook would be comfortable with. And I don't think, after the season he had last year, either of them might come to an agreement there. I'd be fine with him extending as long as it's not a massive number. But it's just with running backs, that's the question is what is a good number for a running back, right? You just saw Christian McCaffrey get a massive contract extension, but that's Christian McCaffrey. You're not going to see other guys, you saw other guys get lowballed and other guys get decent money, but it's running backs are a tough one. So yeah, I don't think we'll see an extension with Cook at least anytime soon.
Right on. And with that, I guess Ben will give you the floor and let you take it away for your 1-minute segment.
Yeah, so my 1 minute segment this week's a little bit more interesting. The NBA Finals just recently wrapped up, and our old friend at the Buffalo Bills, LaShawn McCoy, went on ESPN and then was on his regular show, and he kind of brought up the question of who's the most overrated superstar in the NBA, and he was thinking that it's Luka Doncic, right? So that got me thinking, who is the most overrated superstar or superstar? Obviously, some people might have other superstars in that category that some people might just have as stars, but my question to you guys is, who is the most overrated superstar in the NFL? Lance, Scott, and I talked about it before the show. I was going back and forth, but I'm actually going to go on the defensive side of the ball, and I'm going to go with Sauce Gardner. And Sauce Gardner is a very good cornerback. Don't get me wrong. I know some Jets fans might get defensive, but he is a very good corner. But I see some people having him as top number 1 in the league, up there as that top top 3 corner. And I think he's very good. He might get there one day. Maybe it is this season, but from what I've seen so far, I think that's a little premature to be putting him there in the top 3 range. But like I said, he is a superstar. He's a very good cornerback, but I'm going to go with Sauce Gardner, and maybe it's a little bit biased from him being on the Jets, but I'm going to go with Sauce Gardner there for my most overrated superstar. So let us know down below in the comments. Let us know who your most overrated superstar in the NFL is.
Yeah, good stuff. I think when we talked about it earlier, the first name that came to mind, and I'm just going to be honest and keep it real like we did in the chat there, is, I just went right to Lamar Jackson. Yeah, I don't like the guy's game that much. I said that. And when he needs to get it done, he doesn't. And yeah, his team had the best record. Certainly played well. It's not like he doesn't get the stats, but I feel like, when you compare him to Josh Allen, Allen has the stats too. And I don't know, Lamar gets the MVPs, so that's fine. But I think for that reason, given that he's getting MVPs and things and just not able to deliver when it matters, and it's a team game, but I think, he didn't help his team any in the playoffs this past year. And, they had all their horses for that game, I feel like. So you can't really put it on anybody else. And, Josh Allen, I guess, hasn't got it done either in the postseason. But, for me, I think the most overrated people are just in love with Lamar Jackson. And I don't love him as a passer. He doesn't necessarily execute an offense as well. And I've been watching him since he was at Louisville, being a Syracuse fan. So, I'm not a big fan of his game, but I think he's a little bit overrated, getting, all these MVP awards and all the hype he gets. He does put up stats, no doubt, but just not my type of game, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you on the Lamar stuff, and part of that might be me being a little bit biased just because I have to hear about him all the time living in Baltimore. So I was, as much as I dislike the Chiefs, was a little bit happy to see him struggle in the playoffs just because I felt it fit my narrative a little bit more. Another guy, and sticking at the same position group as Shoop, Jalen Ramsey. I know he's getting a little bit older. And some of this might be the way he came after Josh when Josh was even a rookie and he was talking all that stuff about him. But Josh Allen's done nothing but dominate any team that Jalen Ramsey has been on throughout his whole career. I feel like he's one of those guys that this happens to corners a lot. Like, they have a good first couple seasons, and then teams just kind of stop throwing at them, and then you figure out when you do, wait, this guy really isn't as good as we all thought. Diggs exposed him in week 1 when he was on the Rams 2 years ago. And it just seems like every time that we play Jalen Ramsey, our receivers do pretty well against him. So Jalen Ramsey is another guy that I think is overrated.
Yeah. You guys know I almost went with another AFC North quarterback in Joe Burrow. I almost went with him, but he's gotten injured here and there. Does that play a factor into maybe how I think of him and him being healthy? But, he's another guy that I think's a little bit overrated, maybe not as much as maybe not the most overrated. And then another guy that I just wanted to ask you guys about, just because I thought it'd be funny, is Stephon Diggs an overrated superstar in the NFL?
I don't think so. He had a less than great second half last season, but the numbers he put up in Buffalo other than that were pretty unreal. He was a top 5 receiver, no question. I wouldn't say overrated superstar, but I would say aging superstar.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I don't think he's overrated. I think he's one of the best, route runners and just pure receivers in the league. Certainly struggled in certain times as well, but never struggled to put up the numbers that a top 3 to 5 wide receiver would put up. I don't think, and um, he let his play do the talking a lot of times, and there were some other things about him that people could criticize for sure, and I think they did. But I thought when he was good and when he was having those years in Buffalo, the last few, he didn't get enough credit actually for how good he was, really. So I can't call him overrated at all.
Yeah, I had to ask because I saw some people, especially once that happened, I saw some of Bill's Mafia maybe throwing his name out there and everything. But yeah, I agree with you guys. I think aging still good, maybe on the decline, but still in that superstar and wouldn't be close to at least the most overrated. But just thought I'd ask you guys. But
Yeah, there's no hate for Stephon Diggs over here either. I mean, I wish him the best. Obviously, don't wish him too much success as we're gonna beat him this season. But you know, he did come in and he was great here, and he really helped this team and helped a lot of players on this team get to the heights they were able to go. So it's all loved, and I don't, for whatever reason that the Bills had, um, Bean claims mostly cap reasons to do that, and seeing the drop off in production maybe at the end of last year causes that. So uh, is what it is. It could be a good decision, could have been not a wise decision. We'll find out, but overall, just no, I don't think he's overrated. And again, there's no kind of ill will towards that guy. He was great in Buffalo and one of the best that we've ever seen in a Bills uniform.
yeah,
So we keep him with wide receivers, right? I think we're on to that part of the roster now, and it's the big question. You could see and make arguments for this team carrying 5, 6, or 7 wide receivers. I think 5 is probably a tough sell for most people. I don't think that a lot of people think that. Um, but I think that if they wanted to go heavier somewhere else, and they thought their guys were good enough, you could see it. I mean, I think people will say that they don't have, 5 that are good enough to carry the load and they would need a 6. And I would kind of agree with that as well. But what do you think? I guess we'll start with Shoop maybe, or just give us, I guess, top 3. Let's all go through. I think we have the same top 3, I would assume, right?
yeah. I mean, mine pretty simple. There's Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, and I mean Keon Coleman. I guess would be that third one that's locked in 100%.
That's what I was thinking. Yep.
And then I do think there are 2 other, or at least 1 other lock, but maybe 2 other locks. But those are guys that I could also see arguments for. But to me, they're locks. But those I think would be the 3 that I thought maybe you guys would have would be Coleman, Samuel, and Shakir.
Yep. I have those same 3. I don't really see how that changes unless someone has a crazy good camp or there's an injury, God forbid. But yeah, I think those 3 will be our first 3. And who knows if all 3 will be out on the field first snap of the first game, given how much 2 tight end stuff we're going to run, which we'll get into when we talk about them. But yeah, those 3 will probably be our X, Y, and Z when the season starts out.
I do, though. I will say might be the only one. I know we've been talking about this as well. Overall, I do actually have 7 here. I do have 7 that they are keeping. My one guy that might get cut, which we'll get to later, might be a little bit surprising. But there's one guy that I know I said to you guys before the show that really is on the edge for me, and I just don't know what they're going to do with him. So I do have them keeping him, which I won't say yet, but I just want to say after those top 3, I think maybe the other 3 that you guys might have, which are more popular names than this. Matt Collins, he got brought in. Chase Claypool has been, apparently looking pretty good, rejuvenated, maybe a little bit of a better mindset now than he had years past. And then MVS, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He's been on winning teams before. He's a veteran. And I think he's going to be a guy there. So those are my top 6. And then the 7th guy, I'll wait till you guys, if you guys even have him on your list at all.
Yeah, I was just looking, and I apologize for kind of going back and forth a little bit, but I was just looking for the poll I put up on the brand page a little bit ago on June 15th on what people thought the roster construction would be for the wide receiver position. And I listed 7 wide receivers with 0 fullbacks. So maybe that was the iteration. I could have put, 0 fullbacks or maybe 8 offensive linemen. Maybe that caveat would have got people. Not many people wanted to cut Reggie Gilliam there. Or 6 wide receiver, 1 fullback, which was over 50% of the people. And then 28.5% said five wide receivers with a fullback and an extra O lineman or RB. So that was interesting. I thought that got nearly 30% of the vote. So I am going to agree a little bit with the 6 wide receiver just because I think they can't rely on the same. I think it would be unwise to rely maybe on the same luck at offensive line as they had last year, and to maybe not have that depth. It's a crapshoot. I guess you can go either way. But saying that Gilliam makes it for me then brings me to having 6, and those are Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, Mac Hollins, MVS, and Justin Shorter are the 6 that I have on the Bills roster this year.
Yeah, I also think it's going to be 6 receivers. I kind of, like you said earlier, lean to keeping maybe an extra O lineman. I believe last year they only kept 8. I think this year they might keep 9 because, like you said, you can't rely on the same offensive line to start all 17 games like they did last year. And there's some new pieces on the O line this year. McGovern trying to slide into that center position. David Edwards maybe being a full-time starter for the first time in his career. We got some rookies that they drafted, who are probably going to make the team. So I could see them staying heavy on the O-line side just because there may be a little bit more moving pieces there. But yeah, so I think it's most likely going to be 6 receivers. We already talked about the first 3. Matt Collins and MVS, I think, are pretty close to roster locks. And then for the 6th guy, it comes down to that kind of laundry list of everybody else you got. I think right now, if it was, we roll the ball out and play tomorrow, Chase Claypool is probably that 6th guy. But I do not think that he has much of a advantage over maybe like a Justin Shorter, who was one of the top receiver recruits coming out of high school. Had a disappointing career at Florida, but he's like a big body receiver, similar to Claypool, who can go up and get the ball, and he's a little bit younger. So maybe that helps him out. And they have to like what they saw from him when he was healthy at the beginning last year, because they kept him the whole year and they still have him this year. They could have just cut bait and brought in someone else. So I think Shorter and Claypool are battling for that last position. Right now, I'm leaning Claypool. And then you got, the speed guys like Isabella, Hamler, guys like that, who I would be very surprised if they made the roster, but probably more likely to be practice squad guys. And if it is Claypool over Shorter, I would like to see Shorter on the practice squad, unless, someone else gives him a shot. Maybe somewhere else they're not as deep as wide receiver. But it'd be really interesting to see what they do at that position. It's not quite as locked up as it's been in years past. The household names, like we said, aren't there anymore. Diggs, Davis, going to be kind of more receiver by committee. So everybody, I think, will get meaningful snaps of those 6 guys that we keep, just because they're going to be rotated in and out so much.
Yeah, my number 7 was Justin Shorter. He was the guy that I'm going back and forth on. If I did keep 6, I would kind of be similar as you, Scott. I'm back and forth between Claypool and Shorter, but I would lean Claypool just based off experience, just based off what we're kind of already hearing. I know training camp hasn't started yet, but I would lean that way, but I think they end up keeping both. And then I think, KJ Hamler, I think, goes to the practice squad. And I think actually Xavier Johnson goes to the practice squad, maybe over Andy Isabella. So those are my 2 practice squad guys. But out of the laundry list of, Shavers, Thompson, I could see them keeping 3 receivers on the practice squad for all we know. But yeah, that's kind of a little mixed there. So, but right now I have Xavier Johnson and then KJ Hamler as my practice squad. But yeah, my 7, Shakir, Samuel, Holland, Shorter, Claypool, Coleman, and MVS. So those are my 7 for receivers. And it did unfortunately come at a cost. So we'll be getting to that shortly, though, for who my guy that might have gotten the weird end of the stick there when it comes to the roster configuration.
Yeah, roster construction is definitely a challenge. So I think that when you play this numbers game, when you want to add one somewhere, you got to take one away elsewhere, and um, everyone thinks differently. Where they value me watching a lot more offensive line, I kind of value having that extra interior guy, or wanting to have that extra big guy to step in if they need, because when they talk about all off season so far, their commitment to running the ball this year and talking about um, being physical and things, that also lends itself to more guys missing some time. For me, in my mind, I just want to be able to have that security along the line rather than having that be um, deeper at wide receiver, because uh, Roy brings up a good point in the comments here. We do have two tight ends and two running backs, really three running backs. Honestly, I don't know which two Roy was talking about, but all three of our running backs really are weapons in the passing game here. If I'm talking about Cook, Davis, and Johnson, the people that we kept, on the roster here. So um, that does lend itself to make me cut it at six even, but I'm not sure I can go down to five because I'm not sure where you would actually add that other piece in. I wouldn't really necessarily want to carry four running backs and five receivers. But that does get you an extra offensive lineman, maybe. Maybe it could give you somewhere if you need something on defense. If you want to keep maybe 11 defensive linemen now, and we'll get into that the defense side of the ball next week on next week's show. But if you want to keep 11 defensive linemen, yeah, you may have to keep five wide receivers and think that, okay, well, we got tight ends and running backs that are going to be these pass catching options. So it's very interesting from Roy. I think that's really good. Um, gonna be really good uh, for this roster. It could work out that way, and we don't know obviously, but I would expect three running backs, six wide receivers as we have it right now. And then let's roll into the tight ends a little bit here, and then we'll get to the second 1 minute segment. So tight ends, I guess. Who do you have?
Tight ends is the one. Actually, I'm going to let Scott go first because that's the one that's actually shocking. So I'm going to.
Yeah, I figured that was coming from you. So I think we roll with the same three tight ends as last year. I don't think there's anything crazy there. I think, Knox, Kincaid are definite locks to make the roster. And then after that, Quentin Morris, I think, comes back. He's been great here the last couple of years. Another guy who plays special teams. So with as much two tight end stuff as we're going to be running, I think we need a third guy just in case, someone goes down in the middle of a game or, something like that. Someone who knows the system and who, hey, caught the game-winning touchdown last year against the Giants. So Quentin Morris probably doesn't get a ton of action, but, I think he makes the roster.
Yeah, he's the one that I said he's going to be the one that ends up biting the bullet there, and I think he ends up maybe going to the practice squad. My reason being, and it's a tough one, I do think we'll see a lot of two tight end sets, but I do think with how the speed that they might want to play at this year, getting the ball out with guys that can do very athletic, big guys they have, especially even in the receiving room. I think you can maybe see Mac Hollins lined up a little bit there, maybe him because he's also a good blocker, that he could be like that third tight end along with Gilliam, who like Lance said, they are starting to see him, even last year, they're starting to see him try to use him in out of the backfield, in running routes, get him to refine his route running. And now, I obviously would not be shocked in the slightest if Quentin Morris makes the roster. This is more of a hot take, maybe, that Quentin Morris doesn't make the roster and they do something like this, because even when they do end up having those three tight ends out there on a on a rundown, like 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, they don't care about hiding the fact that they're going to run a third offense or an offensive lineman out there, or a 6th offensive lineman. So I think maybe they want to spread the field out a little bit more, keep that extra 7th receiver. I was way back and forth on this even before the show. You guys know that I actually had 8 offensive linemen before the show. I had Quentin Morris making the roster 41 minutes ago before we started the show. Now I don't. So he's one that I'm back and forth on this. It's real tough for me when I look at the receivers, just because I think they'll want to space it out a little bit. I think Joe Brady will want to use the entirety of the field from the left to the right everywhere. And I just think Quentin Morris, as much as I love Quentin Morris and I think he's a great player, I just think they end up keeping 7, and they look at Mac Hollins and Reggie Gilliam and say, hey, if we need that third guy on the offensive line for a tight end, or if we just need a guy out there, you've seen even Gilliam, maybe not on the line, but right off the line of scrimmage on the end of the line, as a help for a blocker. And I think Mac Hollins, might be able to help out in that as well. He's a big guy, so it might be a little bit of a hot take, but Quentin Morris, unfortunately, I think is going to end up being a cut candidate, maybe practice squad if Kincaid or Knox gets hurt, they bring him up. But yeah, I mean, Kincaid and Knox, obviously they're locks, but Quentin Morris, maybe a hot take, I think ends up biting the bullet.
Yeah, I've got those 3 in: Kincaid, Knox, and Morris. If they do like rolling the dice with like McKitty or Davidson on the practice squad, and think that Morris could get a shot for more playing time given what he's shown, and maybe could be given a better opportunity, maybe they do let him go, and maybe either roster or call up when they need one of either McKitty or Davidson. But I think Kincaid, Knox, and Morris, as it stands now, are the tight ends on this team. All right, so with that, I'm gonna throw myself up here for a 1-minute segment, and my 1-minute segment today is going to be about fantasy football. I want to know, who are your top 5 fantasy football players for the Buffalo Bills in 2024-25? I've got Josh Allen, James Cook, Dalton Kincaid, Curtis Samuel, and Keon Coleman is number 5 for me. I think the splits are going to be fairly even between the receivers, and you're going to need to rely on guys scoring touchdowns. Now, the top scorers last year were Allen, Cook, and then obviously Diggs was there, and is not here this year. But the remaining from last year were Allen, Cook, Kincaid, Shakir, and then Knox. But they only have 5 guys who scored over 100 fantasy points last year, and that's just a pretty remarkable number. So we'll see exactly how it plays out this year. But guys, who do you think is going to be the top 5 in fantasy this year? Obviously, Josh Allen, number 1, seems like a lock. I think given James Cook being the running back one gives him the most likeliness to be number 2. It's kind of hard to catch that running back when he's getting those touches. But then for 3, I think, I went Dalton Kincaid. I think he's going to score a few more touchdowns this year and have similar, if not better numbers, receptions and yards wise, and get closer to that 1,000-yard mark with the increase from 2 touchdowns to maybe 6, maybe 8. So that gives him the 3rd spot. And then I think Curtis Samuel just gives you a lot of different ways to use him. So I put him there at number 4. And at number 5, I think Keon Coleman will score enough touchdowns and come on in the second half of the season enough to be the 5th highest on the team. And a little bit skewed by maybe me seeing Shakir get hurt already in the offseason here and wonder about, okay, is he really going to miss time? Not because of this injury, but maybe because of another one that he might suffer during the season. The way he plays the game, we saw him get knocked out a little bit in the playoffs as well, and did come back into that game. But, just one of those things where, is he going to play enough games? Is he going to be able to score enough touchdowns to become a top 5 fantasy player? I hope I'm wrong, and I hope Shakir overtakes Samuel. I just think they're going to give Samuel enough of those touches that are going to give him the ability to take over that 3 spot. So who do you have for your guys' top 5?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the top 3 there. I think Allen, Cook, Kincaid. I just think Kincaid will get enough touches, even if he doesn't score that too many touchdowns. I think he'll get a ton of receptions this year, a good amount of yards. Cook, pretty self-explanatory. Same with Josh Allen, just like Lance said. It's pretty self-explanatory for those guys. 4, I am going to go Shakir. it is a good point that if he does get hurt, that might skew it a little bit. But I think if he is healthy for majority of the season, maybe misses a game or two, I do think you saw it even last year. Josh start to really trust Khalil Shakir, like really just in big moments, in big games, in tight windows too. He really started to trust Shakir, so I think that will grow this year. And if he does stay healthy, like obviously Lance said, that's a huge. If he doesn't stay healthy, that's a huge if. But I think if he stays healthy, then he'll be number 4. And then number 5, I'm going to go with the Bills defense. I mean, the defense is always one of the top fantasy scoring defenses year after year for the past few years, right? They know how to force turnovers. You're getting Matt Milano back. Terrell Bernard really showed out last year. Rasul Douglas showed that he can get the ball. Safety room might be a little bit of a question mark still. We don't really know fully what we have there, but even on the defensive line, I think it's a deeper defensive line than last year. I think Von Miller will be even healthier now. Adrian Epinesa got that contract, and if he can stay healthy, because he's another guy that needs to stay healthy, I think will have a pretty big year. Greg Rousseau hopefully can take a step. But, I think the defense, they've always been one of the top fantasy defenses. They do, I believe, score usually over 140 usually fantasy points, maybe close
158 last year. So it's a good point, man. I didn't have that on my radar even. I guess I was thinking all offensive guys. So that's a very good point to make.
Yeah, I mean, they're Sean McDermott, defensive coach. So I just think, they're usually top one. If they do fall, I think they maybe fall to that 130 range at the most. I don't think they end up being one of the worst, fantasy defenses there. But they still got guys growing that are young, and they got veterans that know how to play the game of football. So I think that this defense will have another big fantasy year. So they're my number 5. And if Khalil Shakir gets hurt, they could even be the number 4 Bills scorer in fantasy. So if you're looking for a defense early, go Bills early. So.
And if you're going to bring up Tyler Bass, he had 128 points last year. So I would think that
I think he kicks too many extra points. He doesn't get too many long field goals.
I was going to bring up Tyler Bass, but now I won't. I like you said about the defense. I was going to bring them up too if you didn't. But I think the first 3 are locks. Josh has been the number 1 fantasy quarterback for the last however many years, just because his rushing prowess. James Cook, the biggest complaint about him last year as a fantasy player is that Josh Allen took all his touchdowns. Maybe he catches a few more this year. Maybe gets into the end zone a little bit more running. And then, Kincaid, I think, is going to be a top 5 fantasy tight end this year, maybe even top 3. Look for him to have a big season. And then maybe a sneaky tight end, not necessarily a starter, but someone to have on your bench. Dawson Knox. He was hurt for a lot of last season, so his numbers were a little bit skewed. But when he's healthy, Josh loves him as a red zone target. So he may not get a ton of catches, a ton of yards, but if you're in a PPR league and a guy gets 3 catches, 24 yards, and a touchdown, that's an 11 point whatever day. So that's a solid guy to have in there. And then, I was going to have Bass at number 5. I think he needs to have a good kicking year this year after how he struggled towards the end last year and struggled in OTAs, as they said. So, hopefully it is all extra points, but we know he has the big leg. So if he gets a couple, 50-plus yarders, that really help boost up his fantasy score.
Knox was one I almost said, I will say, because he can be a red zone threat. If he scores 10 touchdowns on the year, I mean, obviously that's a good amount, but he's a guy that has shown he can find the end zone. So if he can stay healthy, that's another one that maybe he is one of the top tight ends in fantasy when it comes to top 15. Maybe if he can find the end zone consistently, maybe he takes it away from Kincaid, and Kincaid gets all the catches and yards. Well, Knox gets all the touchdown. But like you said there, Scott, if he puts up 3 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown on average, at least majority of the weeks, that's a top fantasy tight end when it comes to at least lower end fantasy tight ends.
Right on. Yeah, that's a good. I thought that would be a good discussion, and I know we want to keep it right to about an hour here, so we'll go through the offensive linemen, and then get Scott's topic in, and get you guys out of here. So I think we can really say that Dawkins, McGovern, Torrance, and Spencer Brown are absolute locks to this team with David Edwards' contract. I would add him as the fifth. Those are probably your starting five, right? And then backups, we know that they kind of really liked, and I really liked Ryan Vandemark and the way he played, the way he has versatility to swing. I think he's definitely on the roster. I like Lyle Collins to make the team with his versatility, and then also the rookie Cedric Van Pran Granger is my eighth and final offensive lineman.
I think they keep 9 this year. The eighth that you said, and then if I had to pick a ninth right now, could be Will Clapp. He played a solid amount last year with the Chargers. I believe he started a good bit of games at center, and he can play some guard with some question marks in the interior of the offensive line this season. I think he's a guy that could be the ninth offensive lineman because I know they say McGovern's a better center than he is a guard, but we'll see. Center is a really hard position to play, I know, because I've played it. If anything is off there, maybe they end up kicking him back out to guard, and then maybe Van Pran Granger comes in and takes the starting position, but starting as a center at rookie is a lot to ask. So I could see them keeping Will Clapp as that kind of veteran on the inside. I think they go nine linemen this season. I know they went 8 last year, and that's probably where they'd ideally like to be because that gives them probably another defensive lineman that they can keep the way we like to rotate. And we just have so many horses on the defensive line this year, which is great. But you can't rely on starting the same 5 on the offensive line all 17 games, especially when there's some new pieces this year. So I think they keep 9, and maybe that means, one less defensive lineman makes the team. Or do you really need a punter? Let's just score every drive. Yeah, I think they keep 9.
Yeah, I have 9 as well. Scott, you kind of talked me into it over time over the past few months here. You've been talking offensive line, and it is a good point that, last year they were abnormally healthy. Like it was, especially in that front for top 5. And you really, you can't bank on that happening again. So I do have, top 5, as we talked about: Brown, Torrance, McGovern, Edwards, and Dawkins. I do have Van Denmark as well. I agree with you guys. I think the swing versatility is something that they covered there. And then I believe Alec Anderson, I think he ends up making the roster. I think they, like Lance said before even the show, they just like him, right? He's a guy that's been here for a year or so, and can be a guy that can play a little bit inside if absolutely needed. Lyle Collins, same thing. Kind of said that when they signed him, right? Like he is a tackle, but if they need him to, he can bump inside into the guard position. So I think he makes the roster. And then I don't see them cutting Van Pran after drafting him as high as they might have done. Obviously, it wasn't a 2nd-round pick. It wasn't a 3rd-round pick, but it was still, you spend a draft pick on a guy, you don't just want to lose him, especially a guy that it can stay healthy, at least from what he's shown in college. He can be a leader. He has been on a very good football team in Georgia, so I think he makes the roster. Will Clapp's the one that I was back and forth between him and Alec Anderson. I ended up going with Anderson. Clapp, I ended up saying off, but with that name, I feel like everybody would wish he was on the team. Obviously, same with Keaton Bills. That would be a great story, but it's going to be a tough roster to make. But I do think they try to keep maybe Clapp on the practice squad. And then Clayton, I think, will be that exception practice squad. Obviously, he's the international player. And then I think Tylen Grable as well will be a practice squad. So I do think they end up keeping 3 on the practice squad, really 2, because Clayton, this is more of a learning year for him. But I think they keep 9. And, I guess the one thing, if they do keep 8, that maybe means Quentin Morris is back on my roster at least. So it's really between Alec Anderson for me and Quentin Morris. I ended up keeping Alec Anderson. Who knows once we get to training camp, once that starts up, if that ends up changing at all. But for right now, I'm going to say Alec Anderson makes it and Quentin Morris doesn't. So I think they keep 9.
Yeah, and that's going to be, again, the big debate. Does Lyle Collins take that spot from Alec Anderson because of his veteran presence? Does he, does he bring that enough in his versatility as well, or how much? We'll find out exactly how much they do like Alec Anderson, because Anderson and Vandemark have been, talked about in the same breath as far as how much they're coveted by the Bills brass. and coaching staff. So I think they'll be interesting, and we'll see. So you guys have 9, I have 8, and we'll throw up uh, the predictions on offense here throughout the week and get everyone's feedback on that. And then from there, Scott, if you want, take your 1 minute thing here, and we'll have a little discussion about that before we hit the road here.
Let's do it. What's going on, everybody? I want to talk to you all about rookies, specifically rookies on the offensive side of the ball. And want to hear from everybody who they think is going to have the biggest impact right away. Could say Keon Coleman. He seems like the easy answer. Maybe, taking the easy way out because it'll probably be him just based on snap share. But a guy like Cedric Van Pran, if he ends up winning the starting center job, he could have a massive impact right away. Or he can play either one of the guard spots. Maybe having an interior offensive lineman who can play all 3 spots as a rookie would be a big impact. And then you got Ray Davis, could be the goal line running back, can catch the ball out of the backfield a little bit, kind of that power back. He could end the year with 5, 6, 7 touchdowns, if we use him in goal line packages. And then even a guy like Justin Shorter, missed all of last season, but we'll count him as a rookie for this year because he didn't play in any games. If he makes the team, could he be a red zone threat, a big body that we didn't have? So, or maybe do you think someone who was undrafted makes the team? Let us know in the comments. Let us know what you think and what rookie is going to have the biggest impact on this year's Bills offense.
Yeah, it's a great topic. I think you can make a good point for a lot of these guys. I just think where the need was and where the first pick went, that it's going to be Keon Coleman for me, as you're talking about Bill's rookie impact. But I think you can definitely you could definitely think that Dwayne Carter on that interior defensive line, if he comes through big, he could have a massive impact.
Yeah, I'm going to say, number one, I would have to go Coleman unless he gets injured. If he does, let's just say get injured, or let's just say he's really not playing well. I would have to go with Ray Davis, I would think, just because I think, like Scott said, he could end up getting close to, about 5 touchdowns, even if it is less than that, even if it is 4 or 3. I just don't know how much Justin Shorter might be involved in this offense. Van Pran might not even play. So it's going to be a tough one for the rookies, at least, besides Keon Coleman. So, yeah, I think out of everybody, I think most likely outside of Keon Coleman would be Ray Davis for most impactful offensive rookie.
Yeah, Ray Davis was who I was thinking as well. If you're not going to say Keon Coleman, I think he's probably the obvious answer. But yeah, I think Ray Davis will have a good impact. Be kind of that third down back, more of a power guy. So excited to see what he can do in this offense. And not a whole lot of opportunities for rookies the way we are set up on offense this year. Maybe a little bit more on the defensive side. But yeah, we have a pretty established offense, return a lot of starters, which is awesome outside of maybe the receiver position. But yeah, excited to see if any of these guys can crack the lineup because I know there's the stereotype that may or may not be true that McDermott doesn't like to play rookies. So see if any of these guys can crack the rotation and make a big impact.
Yeah, I like that point. I think my biggest thing is I just really have this feeling and this thought that Keon Coleman's going to have a major impact as he gets more comfortable down the stretch. So it may not be the first 10 weeks of the season having a great impact as far as stats and things like that go. But I think when we get down to crunch time, we get down to the last quarter of the season and into the postseason, that he's going to come into his own and really have, be a major threat for this team. Like I said, going into the postseason, I really feel like, people may not be looking at him when he's on the field if he's not as effective the first 10 or so games of the season. And then as that stretch run happens after the bye week, I think we have Kansas City bye week and then the Niners, if I'm correct there. So it's like, I think after that bye week, really going into the Niners game, we could really see an uptick in where he's utilized and how his production and impact on a game can take it to the higher level.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, actually, is, maybe for the first 8 to 10 weeks, it is Ray Davis that's the most impactful rookie. Or maybe it is Justin Shorter if we're counting him as a rookie or whoever. So, I think overall, I do think, yes, Keon Coleman. But, those first few weeks, like we said, they like to ease him in sometimes. Receiver with brand new receiving core, might end up having Keon Coleman get off to a slower start. He could get off to a really good fire start too as well. And Ray Davis though could end up being that goal line back early on. So who knows? Maybe first few weeks it does end up being Ray Davis, and then as Lance said, throughout the season, as it gets later, Keon Coleman starts coming into his own and being that impactful rookie we know or think he can be.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. Well, that's what we got for tonight. Right about an hour. So we appreciate everyone tuning in. If you haven't done so, hit that like, hit that share. Look out for tomorrow for the audio podcast. If you're going to listen to it later, we appreciate that too. Give it a like and a follow on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And can come over to YouTube and subscribe to that Built in Buffalo YouTube channel. Really appreciate it. Be sure to check out the Founders Pod tomorrow night. And then the Red Zone Report on Sunday, and we'll get back rolling next week with some of our great content that we have. We have Buffalo Against the World, obviously Going Deep Buffalo on Wednesdays, and the Hoof Podcast on Thursdays, as well as some Not Your Average Buffalo podcasts sprinkled in throughout the days. T is Thursdays at 2. So be checking out all the Built in Buffalo social media pages as well. And stay tuned, builtinbuffalonews.com. Great articles there. So going to be some exciting stuff coming up for this brand, I believe, and I'm excited to continue rolling. So, gentlemen, any final words before we sign off tonight?
Not too much. I mean, we all were around similar, right? I had 24, Scott had 24 on offense, Lance, you had 23, but we'll see who that one extra then you have on defense the next time we talk about the defensive side. But it's going to be tough when it comes to those last three positions, maybe though, even just the two, maybe the receiver and the offensive line. But it's going to be interesting. We'll know more in a few weeks. I believe training camp tickets go on sale. I know for at least season tickets, I believe, are the 25th. So in 4 days, I believe it goes on sale for season ticket holders. Not sure about non-season ticket holders, but if you are a season ticket holder, get ready. Everybody knows that it's a hectic time getting season or training camp tickets. But we'll see more and hopefully get a better feel of, are they going to keep 6? Are they going to keep 7? Or are they even going to keep 5 receivers? But it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, this year doing a lottery for the non-season ticket holder members for training camp. So yeah, keep your eyes out, get into the lottery, and hopefully you can join us. I know Shoop and I hope to get out to camp, and hopefully we can see some of you guys out there.
Yeah, the Bills are in a good spot. Like, there's some tough decisions to make come roster time, and I bet a lot of the guys that the Bills cut will find home on other teams' 53s, which is a good spot to be. There was a long time where we were the team picking up those guys that got cut. So the Bills are in a really good spot, and it's tough decisions to make, but that just means, we got a lot of good players. So it'll be an interesting training camp and quite a few jobs to be won and a lot of guys fighting for them. So it'll be a fun summer for sure.
Right on. Be safe this weekend, folks, and go Bills.
Go Bills.